Okay, today we're going to be talking about how to graph inequalities. So first, I want to talk about this up here, and then we'll refer to this later when we actually go to graph our solutions. So the way I teach this is using go and la. Now, if you learn another way, that's okay. You can use any method you want. What I do with these words is that if I'm given a greater than or a greater than or equal to symbol, I'm going to know that I'm going to use the word go to remember that G stands for greater than, or equal to. Meaning when I go and split my two inequalities up, I'm going to use the word or to separate my two inequalities. In the same way, la, I know I'm going to use when I have the less than, standing for L, less than or equal to symbol. And when I go and write my two separate inequalities, I'm going to use the word and for that. So let's take a look at number one, kind of show you how I think through this process. Now, when I do this, I want to isolate or get the absolute value bars by themselves first before I divide it up into two separate inequalities. So for number one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides of my inequality. Those cancel out. So I'm left with the absolute value of 2x plus 3 is less than 5. Now, because I have the less than symbol, I'm going to think of the word la because I have the less than symbol. So when I write my two inequalities, I'm going to separate them by using the word and. So our first inequality is not too bad. We're going to just rewrite what we have. So we have 2x plus 3 is less than 5. So write what I have without the absolute value bars. And so my second inequality is going to be separated by the word and. I'm going to have 2x plus 3. One thing you need to remember is that we flip the symbol and flip the sign. So instead of less than, this becomes greater than. And instead of a positive 5, it becomes a negative 5. Very similar to equations, how we would take the positive and negative. But what you have to remember, the difference between equation and inequality, is we also flip the symbol. So instead of less than, it becomes greater than. Now we just solve each one individually. So we're going to subtract, if you want to draw your wall, you can, but we're going to subtract 3 from both sides. And I'm left with 2x is less than a positive 2. After I divide both sides by 2, I get that x is less than 1. So here is one solution, and we're going to get a second solution. So we're going to say and we'll find out what our second solution is here in a moment. So same steps, different result. We're going to subtract 3, just like we did as our first step in this first inequality. So I'm left with 2x is greater than a negative 8. So be careful with your negatives there. A negative 5 minus 3 gives us a negative 8. Divide both sides by 2, and I get that x is greater than a negative 4. So here's my second inequality. So what we're saying is that all of our solutions are going to be between negative 4 and a positive 1. Now let's see how we graph those. So to graph these, we need to go back to this second part that I didn't touch on yet. So what this means is that if I do not have an equal to symbol, I just have the less than or the greater than symbol, I'm going to use an open circle to represent that, meaning that the solution cannot be equal to that number. So for example, when x is 1, I'm going to use an open circle at 1, meaning the solution can't be equal to 1, but it can be really, really close to it, 0.99, but it can't be equal to 1. I would use a closed circle if I had symbols that had the equal to symbol, so less than or equal to or greater than or equal to. So what is interesting about this is that whichever way my arrow points, so at 1, x is less than 1. See how that arrow is pointing to the left? So I'm going to draw my arrow to the left. And you see how my arrow, this symbol of my arrowhead, matches the arrowhead symbol of the less than symbol. That will always be true if or when you graph where the variable is on the left side of your inequality. What about over here? X is greater than negative 4. Let's find negative 4 on the number line. So here's negative 4. I'm going to use an open circle because it does not have an equal to symbol. So I'm going to use an open circle. And then notice how this arrow is pointing to the right. So I'm going to draw from negative 4, draw my arrow to the right. And you see how these meet in the middle. So how we would write this, or how we would say this, is that all of our solutions of this inequality, of our original, are going to be between negative 4 and positive 1. Now, it does get a little bit more challenging for number 2, and if we're going fast, you can pause and rewind as much as you need. Number 2, remember, we isolate the absolute value. One thing you need to know about number 2 is that when I get rid of this negative 2, this is negative 2 times this absolute value. You do not distribute. Please do not distribute. But the opposite of multiplication is division. So we will divide by negative 2. This is just something you need to know. When you multiply or divide by a negative number, you're going to flip the inequality symbol. So instead of bringing this inequality symbol down to be greater than or equal to, you're going to flip it because we're dividing by a negative, in this case, negative 2. So I'm going to flip this around, and instead of greater than or equal to, it's going to become less than or equal to. So we're going to flip the inequality symbol. Now, negative 8 divided by negative 2 is a positive 4. So we do have a positive number, so we're good to go to finish solving. Our absolute values are isolated, so therefore we can write our 2 inequalities. Now, go or law? Law, because this is the less than symbol, and so because this is the less than symbol, I'm going to again use the word and. It is less than or equal to. So I'm going to use the word and to separate. So my first inequality is going to be 4x minus 12 is less than or equal to 4, and we're going to flip the symbol, flip the sign. So 4x minus 12 is greater than or equal to negative 4. So flip the symbol and flip the sign. When we solve these each individually, we're going to add 12 to both sides of our inequality. And so we're left with 4x is less than or equal to 16. After we divide both sides by 4, we're going to get that x is less than or equal to 4. If you want to go ahead and plot that right away, you can. If you want to solve them both, you can. It doesn't matter. But if I go to 4 on the number line, I'm going to use a closed circle because of the equal to symbol. So I'm going to use a closed circle over 4, and my arrow is going to be pointing to the left because my arrowhead is already facing left. Solving the second inequality, same steps, different result. We're going to add 12 to both sides. After I do that, I'm left with 4x is greater than or equal to a negative 4 plus 12 is a positive 8. And then after I divide both sides by 4, I get that x is greater than or equal to a positive 2. So all my solutions are going to be between 2 and 4. I'm going to find 2, and I'm going to put a closed circle because it's equal to. And I would draw my arrow to the right because my arrow is facing right. So they meet together. So we're saying all of our solutions are going to be between positive 2 and positive 4.